We all decided that we should experiment and put on a production of Hamlet. We had no money, we had no space, we had nothing, but we made a commitment that evening that we would somehow produce arguably the greatest play ever written, Hamlet. And so we got up the next morning and people started making calls and making connections, and we ended up connecting with the Glendale Historical Society. And they knew the owners of an old Masonic temple building on the corner of Brand. Some of you are nodding your heads, so you're familiar with that building, Colorado and Brand. And the owners of the building, who are dear, dear friends, Robert and Dennis DiPietro, met with us, and we shared this idea we had to produce this play, and they thought it was a good idea, and we essentially shook hands, and they tossed us the keys, and they said, we're not using the building right now, you're welcome to use it, and when we need it, we'll let you know. And so we took $3,000 that we had in our savings, and we put on this production of Hamlet. And initially we thought, we're gonna do it in blue jeans and t-shirts, it's really about the work, it's about the story, we don't care that there are not costumes, there are no lights, we're really gonna investigate this extraordinary play. And actors started coming out of the woodwork, actors that were really hungry to do this kind of work. Mind you, this was a time, we're talking 1992, where there wasn't a lot of classical theater in LA. There's a lot more opportunities now to see, Shakespeare in LA County, but at that time there wasn't much. And so there was this incredibly well-trained group of actors that found themselves in Los Angeles that were hungry to do this kind of work. So we started rehearsing the play, and things started turning up. Lights started turning up. Someone had a connection with someone who got a hold of some costumes, and by the time we opened the production, we had some lights, maybe 4 or 5, and we had costumes and a fully produced production of Hamlet. There was no money for marketing or anything like that, so we would literally, at the end of the performance, I played Ophelia, my husband played Hamlet. He's dead at the end of the performance. He would pop up, which I think was rather disconcerting for the audience. And he'd say, this is who we are, and this is what we're trying to do. So if you like what you saw here this evening, tell your friends. So it was that grassroots effort. And we went from nights where we had 5 people to we had 15 people to I think the most we ever had in that first run was 25 people. But there was something there. People were connecting with the work, and we were sensing that there was a need for what we were doing. And so when we closed Hamlet, we decided that we would experiment with a 2-play repertory. And so we did a production of The Merchant of Venice, and we did a production of The Way of the World. And we did those in rep, meaning that each night we would alternate plays. And that was probably a defining moment for us, in that the major critic for the LA Times at that time, a woman by the name of Sylvie Drake, who had had a history with ACT, found our press release interesting enough to show up and see the productions. And so we woke up a Thursday morning to find a huge spread in the calendar section of the LA Times on the 2 productions. And she really wrote about the effort. It's just not whether she liked the play or didn't like it, but what we were attempting to do. And that was a time when people actually read newspapers, so it had a huge impact, and people really started to come out to see the work. And so after those 2 plays, then for us it was a moment where we needed to make a decision as to what, whether we were to continue, or whether this had just been, a lovely experiment, and we would all, get on with our lives. And so we decided that there was more there, and we put the company on paper. In that moment, I remember going to Dalton's. I don't know if you remember Dalton's on Brand Boulevard, the bookstore, and I bought a How to Start a 501c3. And I came home to the typewriter and started filling our 501c3 papers. We also made some major decisions that have really are virtually pretty much the way that we operate now. We knew that our focus was going to be the classics. Now it wasn't our vision to be museum theater. We were going to look at what our 21st century concerns are. It was going to be theater of the here and now, but we were going to be looking at it through the prism of classic work. So we knew we wanted to do the classics, and that meant everything from Shakespeare to American classics, to modern classics. We knew that we wanted to do it in rotating repertory. That was a model that was important to us in terms of how it flexes the artistic muscles of the actors involved, and in the way that it builds community with an audience. We also knew that we wanted to follow the resident artist model, something that has almost completely gone from this country, this notion of nurturing artists and spending time together and developing that common shorthand vocabulary that you have that makes for great work. And we also knew that that education was going to be front and center at A Noise Within, that we not only wanted to provide training, but that we wanted our students to come to the theater and be part of our audience base. And so from the very beginning, we had a very committed actress in the company that just essentially sat down and started calling schools and saying, look, these plays were meant to be experienced. They weren't meant to be read in the classroom. Bring your students. We didn't have any funding at the time, no subsidy for students. We were just saying, bring them to the theater. And so that piece was always part of A Noise Within. And so we produced our very first season, 92, 93, a crazy big season. We did Coriolanus. It's the only season, by the way, that I can remember. I can't remember what we did last year, but I remember that first season. Coriolanus, Tartuffe, Duchess of Malfi, Romeo and Juliet, Our Town, and Shaw's Man and Superman, which is a 3-hour, 45-minute proposition. And so that was our very first full season. It was tremendously successful. The company, was really growing year to year. There was a lot of support, a lot of people that were responding to the way that we were producing the work. Our teachers started bringing students to the theater, and very quickly it became clear that there was more demand that we were able to meet in the venue that we were in. And so that was an early problem, very early problem for the organization. Not only did we not have enough space, it was also, we were living on borrowed time because the building was, of course, privately owned, and at any time the owners could say, we have development plans for this building. So we spent, I'd say 10, 12 years trying to figure out a way to either make it work permanently in that building or to make it work somewhere in Glendale. That's the community that we were committed to, and we wanted to somehow make it happen there. It became clear at a point that that wasn't going to work, and we were working with a fundraiser by the name of Noel Hansen, Pasadena resident, who looked at us and said, look, you guys are really beating your head here against the wall in Glendale. If you could snap your fingers, where would you like to be? And without skipping a beat, my husband and I both said Pasadena, because we had often talked about the community and that there's something right about that dynamic in Pasadena that was right for a regional theater. And so he said, well, that's interesting. Mayor Bogart is a friend. Let me give him a call and let's see what he thinks about this. And it turned out that he was a fan of the theater. And the idea of A Noise Within, being a Pasadena, a cultural entity was interesting to him. And so he set us really on the course of looking for either an existing building or space. And if there are such things as coincidences, we ended up through that process connecting with a developer that owned a parcel of land on Foothill Boulevard, 3352 East Foothill Boulevard, which is where we are now. A portion of that parcel is historically significant. It was challenging from a commercial standpoint in terms of what he might do with that space, and so basically it was one of those situations where he said, I'm willing to donate the land if the city is able to work with us, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was essentially a three-way partnership, and then all we had to do was raise $13.5 million to build the building. No problem. And so we set about to do that, and we had raised, it was originally a $16 million campaign, and in 2008, July of 2008, we had reached the midpoint, so we had raised about $8 million, and although we wanted to be further along when we went public, for an organization like ours, we had essentially a $900,000 annual budget. And for an organization like ours, we felt it was really important to put it out there since we've reached this midpoint. Well, that was July 2008, and we all know what happened in November of 2008, so it was perfect timing. And so we found ourselves in this, economic times that no one quite knew the impact that it would have on fundraising. People were canceling capital projects, left and right. And for us, it was really a do or die, and we decided that we needed to pursue it. And so we crawled to the finish line, but we made it. And we opened our new venue in 2011. And have been there ever since. It's been transformative for the organization. We've doubled our audiences, we've doubled our subscriber base. Our budget has gone from $900,000 a year to $3 million, $3.1 million this last year. And one of the things that we're proudest of, we've gone from those early days with groups of 10, 15, 20 kids coming to the theater to this year we will have served about 16,000 students annually. So needless to say, the move has been transformative for the organization, and we really found an extraordinary partnership with the city of Pasadena and the surrounding communities. So that's the A Noise Within story. What questions do you have? What would you like to hear? Yes.
Yeah, one thing you've left out is the teaching element. Our kids have been involved in your summer program for the last several years, and it has exposed. I'm a John Wayne movie more, but it has exposed our kids to have an opportunity to act. And I think that there's probably a lot of people that would enjoy hearing about the teaching classes, not just the going. And seeing the shows, but the teaching classes that you offer for the youth during this time.
Absolutely. So we have this program actually that starts, and are you all doing it this year? Or?
Yes.
Yes, you are. Great. It starts, I think, June.
Apparently. Yeah.
Apparently you are, yes. And the program is Summer with Shakespeare. And it's a 5-week program, although some students do all 5 weeks and some students come in and out. So every week has a theme, for instance. 1 week might be Shakespeare's clowns, and another week might be, the tragedies. And so as a parent, you don't have to do all 5 weeks if you have vacation plans and that sort of things. But the training it was really modeled after our training at ACT, so it's as rigorous as the training that we received in our graduate program. So students take classes in textual analysis, stage combat, masks, movement, and so they take their classes in the early part of the day, and then in the afternoon they rehearse for a production. And so the students that do the 5 weeks they design their costumes, they design their sets, and they have a director that helps them with all of that. But it's intense. It is a great opportunity for. A lot of our students are not even students that necessarily want to pursue a career in theater, but it helps them with an understanding of Shakespeare because they get to get on their feet, they get to wrap their mouths around those extraordinary words, and they find that when they go back to school and when they're tackling the text, they have a better understanding of it. So it's really, I'd say it's about 50-50. You have students that really have an interest in theater, but then you also have students that are coming in because they want to know a little bit more about Shakespeare. So thank you for bringing that up. And we also have classes year-round, both from 6-year-olds to 18-year-olds classes that are offered during the year. And those classes are not necessarily all focused on Shakespeare, but our summer program is Shakespeare-centric.
How did you come up with the name?
A Noise Within, yes. A Noise Within. It's funny, I talked about the rehearsals for Hamlet and how we were sitting around, and before we know it, we're rehearsing a play. We didn't have a name, and we thought, we have to do some kind of a flyer or something, so we have to have a name. And my husband was sitting next to me, and it's a stage direction in Hamlet. And he circled the stage direction, and it's, I think, Act 3, Scene 5, before Laertes enters, it says, alarum, a noise within, which basically means in Shakespeare, it happens in a few of his plays, there's some commotion or something that is going on off stage before a character enters. And he circled that, and we thought, well, that's really interesting. And it was either that or false Danish dogs, and we thought a noise within was a little better. But then, of course, it speaks to the idea that we all have this creative expression within us, this noise within us, and all of that. And so it's been. The name has had long-term payoff. In the early days, we got all sorts of weird things like, is this noises off? No, I want to see noises off. No, this is a noise within. Yes, it was a happy accident. Yes.
I have been a season subscriber since you moved to Pasadena, and so I've become more than passingly familiar with your resident artists. It's very fun to see them coming and going and whatnot, but what I wanted to know was how do you choose them, or how do they choose you? How does that process work?
Well, before we consider a resident artist, before we consider someone a permanent, a resident artist, for our season, for instance, we have guest artists, so people that just come and go and do shows, and then we have this core group of resident artists. Generally, someone has to have worked with us on three to five productions, and if it's an individual that artistically you're in sync, and it's an artistic relationship that you want to continue to pursue, and quite frankly, sometimes you think of a type. We don't have an ingenue in the resident company, so you're always on the lookout for that kind of thing. So you're looking for individuals that you consider great artists, and relationships that you would like to develop and continue. You're also looking for, there's a certain generosity of spirit that comes with being a resident artist at A Noise Within, because we ask that you have to embrace our values. So as a resident artist, you have to have that relationship that you feel that our artists have with our audience members, with the community. That's an important part of what we do. Our artists, we expect them to be committed to education and to be leaders in that. Some of them teach, and there are some Shakespeare programs, some of them teach in our residencies when we go into the school. That's not necessarily a requirement, but they have to embrace that part of what A Noise Within does. And that may mean that they're the ones who always lead the post-show conversations during our student matinees, or when we do conversations with our student audiences. So the art is up here, but also it's someone that really sort of fits the bill in terms of what we value and how we engage with our community.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's fun, because in our case, there are no stars. The company is the star, and I think that that's it should be. And it's this group of people that really, set the stage for how we approach the classics. Yes.
You said you went into the classroom. Do you actually go into schools?
Yeah, we sure do. We our primary focus has always been about bringing students to the theater. So from the time that we started, and so each year we do about 20 student matinees, and those are your traditional, 10:30, 11 a.m. performances. The same performance that you see our students see. So we don't change anything. We don't cut it in length. We don't, for lack of a better word, dumb it down for students. They see the same production, the same A team, there's no B team, the same performances that our adult audiences see our students that come to the performances see. And so our focus has always been on that, and has been on partnering with teachers. A lot of our teachers that come to the theater teach the plays in the classroom. So that's really invaluable to them. So for instance, right now, all our teachers have this season, so as they're planning their curriculum, if they're teaching Shakespeare, they're going to teach Henry V. So at this point, because we've become a reliable resource for them, whatever play A Noise Within is doing, they're going to teach it in the classroom. And so Raisin in the Sun, for instance, next year is taught in a lot of 9th grade classes, so those teachers are going to participate in that. So for us, it's always been about that, because you can't really capture, not that there isn't value to a performance in a cafetorium, but you can't capture the magic that happens in a theater with the production values and all of that. So that's first and foremost, but then we also do residencies in schools. So for instance, this year we have, to give you an example, a residency with Monrovia. where we've been performing King Lear this year, and so we've gone in there and we've taught the play to their students. Their students have rehearsed their own production of King Lear, and then just 3 weeks ago, they came and they performed their production of King Lear on our set. And so we do all kinds of, residencies such as that one. In some cases we may be in a school for 6 weeks. In some cases it may be the sort of thing where we come before the students come to see the show and work with them in advance of them seeing the play, and then go back to the school after they've seen the production and work with them then. So, we essentially do it all, yes.
How do you select your productions, and how do the artists get to kind of have an input? And finally, do you get to act in any of your plays?
Yes, well, I don't act in any of our plays, so that's the easy one to answer. No more acting. I primarily direct plays these days. In terms of choosing the season, it's a combination of things. We usually start right around November or December, and we generally announce a new season in April. And sometimes we'll get together with directors that we're interested in working with, and we talk to them about what's on your bucket list of plays that you'd like to direct. Our resident artists have suggestions. Our patrons have suggestions at times. We will look at playwrights that we haven't presented, particular genres that we haven't presented. There's a whole pile of plays that didn't make it on a particular season only because either tonally it wasn't right as you try to find balance within a season. And then there's the whole piece where you can't help but be impacted by what's going on around you. And for instance, this year was an interesting season for us because we were going in a particular direction before we announced 1718, and then, there's, regardless of politically where you are, there's a lot going on and there's a lot of angst out there, and we found ourselves gravitating towards these very dark plays, and we thought, okay, that's not the answer. Let's look at, hope, and how do you look at, how can you affect change when you find yourself in circumstances that seem out of control, and so what's going on either personally or what's going on in the world around you can't help but have an impact. But that seems to happen somewhat organically, that you end up gravitating towards certain work. So it's really a little bit of everything, and then you have to find the right balance within a season so that you're not presenting 6 tragedies, and the comedies are always the really hard ones to find and to fit in and all of that. So it's a complicated process. Yes.
Have you reached out to Orange County School of the Arts because of our new charter school in Duarte, or have they reached out to you?
Yes, they have actually. Yeah. Our education director has been in communication with them. Yeah, and I think that there's something coming up next year that they're coming to, but she has been working with them. Yeah, we work with over about 130 different schools from 18 to 22 different school districts. So it's pretty wide reach. And I think because again, it's such a resource for teachers in the classroom. So a lot of these students that are coming to this, these are not drama students. These are, your language art classes that are coming to the shows. And when we do the French plays, the French students will be coming. A lot of the Spanish students are coming to Man of La Mancha. And so you can play that A Noise Within presents in some classroom somewhere. Yes?
You have this wonderful theater. You raised 13 or 16 million. Who owns it now, and how are the finances working out for A Noise Within? Is it financially successful?
We own it. So the land is ours, yes. So A Noise Within, the organization owns it. Yes, and financially, yes, it's, as I said, it's really been, the move has been transformative for the organization. And, people love to hear it, but we've never, had a deficit in our 25-year history, so we like to balance our budgets.
Do you see a time where you might outgrow your current facility, given 350 seats doesn't seem very big?
We have 283 seats, and really that is by design. because one of the things that's important to us is that for us, it's always been about the classics up close and personal. And up close and personal in, you know, in the physical space, in that we perform, it's a thrust stage, so for those that you have been there, you're surrounded by the audience, so when we're in there, we're really having a conversation with you. It's not some proscenium where there's that, you know, that space and you feel removed from the process. It's very much a conversation. We're all in there together, experiencing these great stories. So it's been about the physical proximity. It's also been about, as I mentioned before, these plays being about the here and now. So that doesn't necessarily mean we have to set it on the moon to make it of the here and now, but you know, we'll set Shakespeare in modern dress, and we'll set it in period as well. But it's always about looking at what does this play has to say to us right now. And so it's about that kind of intimacy, and frankly, it's about intimacy just in terms of our community and how we relate to our audiences. When you start coming to a noise event for a while, you feel you're part of a family. And I think we all feel that. The artists feel that, the patrons feel that. There's an energy, we get to really know each other. So we're really part of, together, something bigger than ourselves. And we get to come to this room every night and share in these extraordinary works. So the thing is, you may not like what we do, but we don't do bad plays. So you know that you're always going to have a good play when you come to a noise event. But there's some potential for growth in terms of we have a whole row of seats that we have the ability to add within that space, and we'll see. It's possible that there will come a time when we need more space. But we have opportunity to add performances and extend shows, so, yes?
It's more of a comment than a question, but your husband's Don Quixote is incredible.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. It's been extraordinary doing that play. It's just, our audiences are just, I don't know when but you know, every night people are just wild. And whether it's the story of hope and the fact that it's set in a modern context makes it more accessible, but it's just been creatively very, very satisfying to put together and very satisfying to be in the room with all of you. Yes?
You have wonderful facilities for people that are physically challenged. Because I had several people comment to me that it was really easy to go see a play there. And that's great.
That's great. Well, there was a lot of effort that went into that within the design of the building in terms of ADA compliance and all of that. And I think it's you know, it's a very friendly space in that way. Someone back here, yes.
I may have just comment over here. I'm not sure if you made reference to it. Did you not stage the Man of the Matcha in Glendale at a previous time before you left over there?
Yes, 12 years ago we staged it, and
I think that was the last one I saw.
yeah.
And I will see this one, which is closing, I guess, very soon.
Well, we've just extended it, so now it's running, so you have a little bit more time. It's yeah, great.
But I was curious in your comment, when you get together and you plan the next season, just taking one isolated case, what was, if you can recall, what went into the discussions, what went into the choice of Man of La Mancha for what was going on in the world or whatever that you felt this would fit in at this time, that came around again? That's one of my favorites, that's why I was so glad.
Yeah, well, the fact that it fits so perfectly right now was an accident, because we chose the season about a year ago, but on a level it was personal, because we were looking at a 25th anniversary season, and the whole thing was beyond our wildest dreams, because that has been essentially our trajectory, because who would have thought that, you know, two kids with $3,000 of this idea that, you know, that people in LA would be interested in Shakespeare, which no one thought, you know, they would, and that we would find ourselves in this extraordinary space. So it was very personal, and that, you know, that whole play is about big, you know, dreaming big dreams. And for those of you that have seen King Lear, we've paired those two. And so they're partner productions, which means that they live within the same set, except that the set is dressed rather differently, but Quixote and Lear are the same actor, and Sancho and the Fool are the same actor. So that was also part of the decision to do that, that both plays are about dreams, some more nightmares than dreams, but yes, yeah. Yes.
How long has Man of La Mancha been extended to?
It's extended to June 4th.
June 4th. Number one. And then number two, how old does a play have to be in order to be considered a classic?
Well, I'll tell you what, Tyrone Guthrie used to say very pompously, it's a classic if I say it's a classic. So not very old. I mean, part of what we look at when we make that choice is, it's very simple. True today, true yesterday, true tomorrow. And if there's a play that's written in 2017 that we think will stand the test of time, it's subjective, but that's a decision that artistic directors we end up making. So, for those of you that, are looking, going, oh gosh, Shakespeare's not my thing, there's a lot to choose from at a noise event. It's not just Shakespeare. American classic is always part of the repertory, so every year there's an American classic as part of the season, and we do modern classics. We're doing Noises Off. That's considered a modern classic. We have done Sam Shepard, we have done Tony Kushner, we have done Sarah Rule. And so it really, if we feel that, the play's themes will speak to us, 200 years from now, then yes. Yes.
I understand that season tickets are flexible. Can you explain to the audience how you work season tickets versus other types of theaters?
Yes, sometimes with other theaters, you have a set night that you have to choose, so that you have the Tuesday night subscription, you have the Thursday night subscription, and you're kind of tied to those dates. Whereas we have what we call a flex pass, which essentially means you can get your subscriptions. You don't even have to choose your dates now. You can choose them, whenever the time is right for you. So really, it's very flexible in that you can make changes all the time. I was mentioning that our box office manager says, oh, the subscribers have all chosen their dates. Of course, they'll never come to any of those dates they chose, but they've already chosen them. Because then she starts getting calls for changes. But that's the idea, to provide as much flexibility as possible for our patrons.
I think that's it. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And we already talked about normally we have a nice award for her coming, and unfortunately I failed to pick it up. So
That's it. I'm out of here.
That's out. All done. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. In September, we have the new Virginia Steele Scott, Chief Curator of American Art, will be speaking to us. It's Chad Oligood, and with the Huntington Library, and our dinner meeting will be at the Huntington. So please come. I think it'll be a great program, and it'll be fun to get introduced to the new director of the American Collection. Thanks all for coming. Thank you.